Welcome back into another episode of the best history lesson and spiritual insights on the planet. This is the Spaceman 2.0 Phoenix Truth Rising show, here to help you grow in the knowledge and wisdom of truth, and the truth will set you free. Exposure of the Illuminati's plan of world conquest is the death knell to the New World Order. So, with that being said, let's get back on into Through Darkness and the Light, Endless Cycles of the Divine Plan, Volume 1, with language branches and the difference in understanding how Genesis was put together from the Sumerian texts, which came from the Enuma Elish afterwards. So, getting right back on into language branches. Unaware of its origin, you continue to apply this descriptive epithet to your planet to this very time and place. The intriguing fact is that over time the Sumerian civilization was 2,000 years old by the time Babylon arose, and the pronunciation of the term ki changed to gi or sometimes ge. It was so carried into the Akkadian and its linguistic branches, Babylonian, Assyrian, Hebrew, at all times retaining its geographic or topographic connotation as a cleavage, a ravine, a deep valley. Thus, the biblical term that through Greek translations of the Bible is read Gehenna stems from the Hebrew word Gai-Hinnon, the crevice-like narrow ravine outside Jerusalem, named after Hinnon, where divine retribution shall befall the sinners via an erupting subterranean fire on Judgment Day. If you were taught at all in school, you were taught that the component geo in all the scientific terms applied to Earth, sciences, geography, geometry, geology, and so on, comes from the Greek word Gaia or Gaia, their name for the goddess of earth. You were not taught, however, where the Greeks picked up this term, or what its real meaning might have been. The answer is, guess what? Surely enough, from the Sumerians, ki or G. Scholars all agree that the Greek notions of primordial events and the gods were directly borrowed from the Near East through Asia Minor, at whose western edge early Greek settlements like Troy were located, and via the island of Crete in the East Mediterranean, nearby to Atlantis, according to Greek tradition. Zeus, who was the chief honcho god of the 12 Olympians, arrived on the Greek mainland via Crete, whence he had fled after abducting the beautiful Europia, daughter of the Phoenician king of Tyre. Aphrodite arrived from the Near East via the island of Cyprus. Poseidon, whom the Romans called Neptune, came on horseback via Asia Minor, and Athena brought the olive to Greece from the lands of the Bible. There can simply be no doubt that the Greek alphabet developed from a Near Eastern one. Dharma, please see that illustration I shall find for you is placed herein, for it will give much confidence in this story. See next page. There are many books which speak of these ancient times, not the least of which was the Iliad by one called Homer. This line of historical mythology or tradition was handed down as regarded the creation of celestial gods or visitors who came to stay, etc., of heaven and earth, out of chaos. These tales, dear ones, are not greatly unlike your own biblical tales of the beginning. So here you can see the alphabet, Aleph, Beth, all the Hebrew letters, and their Canaanite and what they look like. But if you look at the Chaldean, they don't have it here. I'll show you in another text. The Chaldean and the Hebrew are same. And Abraham came from the land of Ur, which is in central Iraq, in Babylon. So, having said that, let's move on. Verily, at the first chaos came to be, and the next the wide-bosomed Gaia, she who created all the immortal ones, who hold the peaks of snowy Olympus, dim Tartarus, wide-pathed in the depths, and Eros, fairest among the divine immortals. From chaos came forth Erebus and black Nyx, and of Nyx were born Ether and Hemera. So what do we have here? At this point in the process of the formation of the divine immortals, the celestial gods, heaven does not yet exist, just as the Mesopotamian sources recounted. Accordingly, the Gaia of these verses is the equivalent of Tiamat, she who bore them all, according the Enuma Elish. Hesiod lists the celestial gods. who followed Chaos and Gaia in three pairs, Tartarus and Eros, Erebus and Nyx, Ether and Hemera. The parallel with the creation of the three pairs in Sumerian cosmogony, nowadays named Venus and Mars, Saturn and Jupiter, Uranus and Neptune, should be obvious, though this comparability has gone quite unnoted. Only after the creation of the principal planets that made up the solar system, when Nibiru appeared to invade it, does the tale by Hesiod, divine genealogy, exactly as in Mesopotamian and biblical texts, speak of the creation of Uranos, heaven. As explained in the book of Genesis, this Shamaim was the hammered-out bracelet, the asteroid belt. As related in the Enuma Elish, this was the half of Tiamat that was smashed to pieces, while the other, intact half, became Earth. All this is echoed in the ensuing verses of Hesiod's Theogony. And Gaia then bore starry Uranos, equal to herself, to envelop her on every side, to be an everlasting abode place for the gods. It is beginning to seep through why the one-world elite would call themselves Olympians. Committee of 300, that's a book by Eustace Mullins. Please look it up, research it, get that. Tiamat becomes Gaia. Now split up equally, Gaia ceased to be Tiamat, severed from the smashed up half that became the firmament, everlasting abode to the asteroids and comets. The intact half, which was thrust into another orbit, became Gaia, the Earth. And so did this planet, first as Tiamat and then as Earth, live up to its epithets. Gaia, Gi, Ki, the cleaved one. How did this cleaved planet look now in the aftermath of the celestial battle? It was now orbiting as Gaia, Earth. On one side there were the firm lands that had formed the crust of Tiamat. On the other side there was a hollow, an immense cleft, into which the waters of the erstwhile Tiamat poured. And again, Hesiod put it nicely, Gaia, now the half equivalent to heaven. On one side, brought forth long hills, grateful haunts of the goddess nymphs, and on the other side she bare Pontus, the fruitless deep, with its raging swell. Same picture as Genesis. This is the same picture painted by the book of Genesis. And Elohim said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathered together water he called seas. By this time the nice new Gaia was beginning to take shape. Some 3,000 years separated Hesiod from the time when the Sumerian civilization had blossomed out, and it is clear historically that throughout those millennia, ancient peoples, including the authors or compilers of the book of Genesis, accepted the Sumerian cosmogony. Today you call it myth, legend, or religious beliefs. In those previous millennia, it was science, knowledge, the Sumerians asserted, bestowed by the Anunnaki. No, I did not say Pleiadians, so don't get ahead of your own story. According to ancient knowledge, Earth was not an original member of your solar system. It was cut off, cleaved off, half of a planet then called Tiamat, she who bore them all. The celestial battle that led to the creation of Earth occurred several 100 million years after the solar system with its planets had been created. Earth, as a part of Tiamat, retained much of the water that Tiamat, the water monster, was recognized for. As Earth evolved into an independent planet and attained the shape of a globe dictated by the forces of gravity, the waters were gathered into the immense cavity on the torn-off side, and dry land appeared on the other side of the planet. Please go back and refer to ancient maps depicting changes in the planet's continental arrangements. This, therefore, in summary, is what the ancient peoples knew. What do your modern scientists say about this? Today's outlay. The theories concerning planetary formation hold that they started as balls congealing from the gaseous disks extending from the sun. As they cooled, heavier matter, iron in Earth's case, sank into their centers, forming a solid inner core. A less solid plastic or even fluid outer core surrounded the inner core. In Earth's case, it is believed to consist of molten iron. The two cores and their motions act as a dynamo, producing the planet's magnetic field. Surrounding the solid and fluid cores is a mantle made of rocks and minerals. On Earth, it is estimated to be some 1,800 miles thick, while the fluidity and heat generated at the planet's core, some 12,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the Earth's center, affect the mantle and what is on top of it. It is the uppermost 400 miles or so of the mantle on Earth that mostly account for what you see on the surface of the planet. Its cooled crust. Of course, the way it was actually formed gave no hot crust to cool. The processes that produce over billions of years a spherical orb, the unifying force of gravity, and the planet's rotation around its axis should also result in an orderly layering. The solid inner core, the flexible or fluid outer core, the thick lower mantle of silicates, the outer mantle of rocks, and the outermost crust should encompass one another in ordered layers, like the skin of an onion. This holds true for the orb called Earth, but only up to a point. The main abnormalities concern Earth's uppermost layer, the crust. Even scientists can't make it add up. Since the extensive probes of the Moon and Mars in the 1960s and 70s, geophysicists have been greatly puzzled by the paucity of the Earth's crust. The crusts of the Moon and of Mars comprise 10% of their masses, but the Earth's crust comprises less than 0.5% of the Earth's landmass. In 1988, geophysicists from Caltech and the University of Illinois in Urbana, led by Don Anderson, reported to the American Geological Society meeting in Denver, Colorado, that they had found the missing crust. By analyzing shock waves from earthquakes, they concluded that material that belongs in the crust has sunk down and lies some 250 miles below the Earth's surface. There is enough crustal material there, these scientists estimated, to increase the thickness of the Earth's crust tenfold. Even if such nonsense were a possibility, it would have given Earth a crust comprising no more than about 4% of its landmass, still only about half of what seems to be the norm if you are going to consider the Moon and Mars as the norm. Half of the Earth's crust will still be missing, even if the findings of this group could prove to be correct. This theory also leaves unanswered the question of what force caused the crustal material, which is lighter than the mantle's material, to dive, in the words of the report in point, hundreds of miles into the Earth's interior. The team's suggestion was that the crustal material down there consists of huge slabs of crust that divided into the Earth's interior, where fissures exist in the crust. But what force had broken up the crust into such huge slabs? Oops. Other abnormalities. Another abnormality of the Earth's crust is that it is not uniform. In the parts you call continents, its thickness varies from about 12 miles to almost 45 miles. But in the parts taken up by the oceans, the crust is only 3.5 to 5 miles thick, while the average elevation of the continents is about 2,300 feet. The average depth of the oceans is more than 12,500 feet. The combined result of these factors is that the much thicker continental crust reaches much farther down into the mantle, whereas the oceanic crust is just a thin layer of solidified material and sediments. There are other differences between the Earth's crust, where the continents are and where the oceans are. The composition of the continental crust, consisting in large part of rocks resembling granite, is relatively light in comparison with the composition of the mantle. The average continental density is 2.7 to 2.8 grams per cubic centimeter, while that of the mantle is 3.3 grams per cubic centimeter. The oceanic crust is heavier and denser than the continental crust, averaging a density of 3.0 to 3.1 grams per cubic centimeter. It is thus more akin to the mantle, with its composition of basaltic and other dense rocks, than to the continental crust. It is noteworthy that the missing crust the scientific team mentioned above suggested had dived into the mantle is similar in composition to the oceanic crust, not to the continental crust. This leads to one more important difference between the Earth's continental and oceanic crusts. The continental part of the crust is not only lighter and thicker, it is also much older than the oceanic part of the crust. By the end of the 1970s, the consensus among scientists was that the greater part of today's continental surface was formed some 2.8 billion years ago. Evidence of a continental crust was from that time that was about as thick as today's is found in all the continents in what geologists term Archean shield areas. But within those areas, crustal rocks were discovered that turned out to be 3.8 billion years old. In 1983, however, geologists of the Australian National University found in Western Australia rock remains of a continental crust whose age was established to be 4.1 to 4.2 billion years old. In 1989, tests with new sophisticated methods on rock samples collected a few years earlier in northern Canada by researchers from Washington University in St. Louis and from the Geological Survey of Canada determined the rock's age to be 3.96 billion years. Samuel Bowering of Washington University reported evidence that nearby rocks in the area were as much as 4.1 billion years old. Earth's age, 4 billion plus. Scientists are still hard but to explain the gap of about 500 million years between the age of the Earth, which meteor fragments, such as those found at Meteor Crater in Arizona, show to be 4.6 billion years and counting, and the age of the oldest rocks thus far found. But no matter what the explanation, the fact that Earth has had its continental crust at least 4 billion years ago is by now undisputed. On the other hand, no part of the oceanic crust has been found to be more than 200 million years old. Cellas, this is tremendous difference. No amount of foolish speculation about rising and sinking continents, forming and vanishing seas can explain these things. Someone has compared the Earth's crust to the skin of an apple. You people really like apples. Where the oceans are, the skin is fresh, relatively speaking, born yesterday. But where the oceans began, its primordial times, the skin, and a good part of the apple itself, has been shorn off. The differences between the continental and oceanic crusts must have been even greater in earlier times, because the continental crust is constantly eroded by the forces of nature, and a good deal of the eroded solids are carried into the oceanic basins, increasing the thickness of the oceanic crust. Furthermore, the oceanic crust is constantly enhanced by the upwelling of the molten basonic rocks and silicates that flow up from the mantle through the faults in the seafloor. This process, which puts down ever new layers of oceanic crust, has been going on for 200 million years, giving the oceanic crust its present form. What was there at the bottom of the seas before then? Was there no crust at all? Just a gaping wound in the Earth's surface? And is the ongoing oceanic crust formation akin to the process of blood clotting, where the skin is pierced and wounded? Is Gaia a living planet trying to heal her wounds? The most obvious place on the surface of the Earth where it was so wounded is the Pacific Ocean. Oh my goodness, could it be? While the average plunge in the Earth's crust in its oceanic parts is about 2.5 miles, in the Pacific the crust has been gouged out to a present depth reaching at some points 7 miles. If you could remove from the Pacific's floor the crust built up there over the last 200 million years, you would arrive at depths reaching 12 miles below the water's surface,